As much as Verne's story can be considered timeless, there's still a great deal of period fluff that dates the story and obstructs the themes. Also, Verne's portrayal of people, from common people to learned people, Americans and non Westerners like Africans, Balloonians, and Robert himself, read very much like an overly deterministic portrayal via stereotypes and other mental shortcuts. Having a reductionist portrayal of characters wasn't necessarily bad for the story in its time, it was plenty popular besides. But reading it in modern times leaves something to be desired where characterization is concerned. The story of Robert's conquest of the air via the fantastic flying machine Albatross deserves a complementary story of a character engaging with that dream. And here I see potential with a character in Fry Colin's place. In the story, Fry Colin is a valet for Uncle Prudent, a young African American man who is explicitly denigrated as a gluttonous coward. It doesn't matter that being kidnapped and forced into a flying adventure is good reason to fear for one's safety. The characters Uncle Prudent, Phil Evans, and even Robert purposefully reject all sympathy for Fry Colin. We have the benefit of more than a century in aviation to appreciate that fear of flying is not a moral failing. But the characters hold no such regard for Fry Colin, whose trepidation would be reflected in the vast majority of people if they were in his position, and don't have the benefit of author Verne's favor. The one time that someone seems to show outward concern for Fry Colin, Uncle Prudent, when Robert proceeds to force Fry Colin into a barrel to dangle overboard, it may well be less concern for Fry Colin's well-being than it is likely his sense of possession of Fry Colin. Only Uncle Prudent can abuse Fry Colin, and Robert doing so is a trespass. Verne explicitly writes that the worst thing that can happen between Uncle Prudent and Fry Colin is if Fry Colin denounces his master. The further the story goes on, the more we can be certain that Verne's characterization of Fry Colin is not a satire on period racist views, but meant to be a genuine degradation of a character for his particular written visage. The way I read the text was as if it was sarcastic, like how one might mockingly exaggerate someone's bigotry to have it stick out as an absurdity. But that's my license. I don't actually have reason to believe that the author Jules Verne would choose that reading of his own text. Alas, this comes with the territory when reading old stories featuring non-white characters. There's nothing to gain by whitewashing it. But it can be instructive, for in Fry Colin, a character of his disposition and placement in story, I see an opportunity that Jules Verne apparently didn't. Fry Colin is in a good position to be a central character with his own arc and journey, where not only Robert is moving the story, but both can make a dialogue in service to the story's themes. Let's start at the beginning. Fry Colin is a young man looking for work, domestic or similar, so he goes looking in Philadelphia. But his eye catches the novel endeavors of nascent aviation, balloons and gliders, and even amateur experimentals, so he tries to find where he can get in on the action. But he has no education or experience even remotely helpful to those endeavors, so he decides, instead, if he can't start tinkering in aviation on his own, maybe he can join a group that's collaborating to that end. This is where he finds employ as a valet with Uncle Prudent, and through him gets closer to such a group, the Balloonians. But the Balloonians are a very exclusive club, full of rich, self-important, and mercurial personages. Thus, opportunities to learn the trades that might lead to flight are few and far between. Indeed, Fry Colin wouldn't be taken seriously by this lot. At some time later, the worldwide frenzy over an unidentified aerial phenomenon, then flying object, takes place, and Fry Colin gets taken in by the mystery, even trying to engage Uncle Prudent and the Balloonians to investigate. But this goes nowhere, so Fry Collins starts to feel he isn't going anywhere with this crowd. Then one day, a strange man naming himself Robur the Conqueror introduces himself to the Balloonians' congregation, and the brawl nearly ensues. By day's end, Fry Colin, Uncle Prudent, and Phil Evans are prisoners of Robur on his albatross, just as written. Fry Colin especially has cause to fear for his well-being. The legacy of the American slave trade and chattel slavery would be fresh in his mind and upbringing. It gets even worse when, being neglected for so long, once Prudent finally deigns to release his bonds, he tells Fry Colin that he may be sacrificed, like an emergency provision, for the benefit of Prudent and Evans, people who have never lowered themselves to fellowship with Fry Colin. This would be the point where Fry Colin starts to feel he's truly on his own in hostile territory, which isn't helped when he discovers his effective imprisonment on Albatross for the indulgence of Robur and his imposition on Prudent and Evans. For a while, Fry Colin, despite his nascent interest in aviation, is left alone to face his fear of flying, what was so abruptly forced on him. However, instead of cowering in his cabin for the whole voyage, as originally written, by and by, Fry Colin acclimates to the flying, loses his fear of heights via exposure, and starts to take an interest in Albatross, a truly remarkable flying machine. While Uncle Prudent and Phil Evans are busy sightseeing and not believing the marvel they're standing in, Fry Colin chooses to engage the crew, get a closer look at the Albatross's inner workings, and by engage Robur himself. In Robur, Fry Colin has an opportunity to learn from a towering intellect as to what's needed for flight. I don't know if Robur, as written by Verne, would indulge in teaching Fry Colin, but for this rewrite, it would be interesting that Robur would see a young, pliable mind fit for learning and decide to aggrandize himself, pass on what he's learned for conquering the air. For Fry Colin, this is the truly engaging opportunity he's been waiting for. Instead of being looked down on for his non-privileged upbringing, maybe he can find meaning and recognition in a great enterprise as flight, knowing freedom and autonomy he could never have while stuck grounded, or even in the company of Balloonians and their inflated egos. But this good thing can't last forever. Robur and Fry Colin come to a serious disagreement. In learning the science and engineering necessary for people and machines to fly, Fry Colin would start getting ideas. Ideas about allowing more people to fly, allowing flight itself to become more useful to people, and how the two of them could make this possible future a reality. But Robur is not one to collaborate with another as an equal. He taught Fry Colin in hopes of gaining another acolyte, as it were, and has no intention of spreading his knowledge outside his small support group, his empire. This whole enterprise, culminating in the Albatross and its voyage, is not about uplifting anyone else except Robur himself. After all, he's a conqueror, and sharing is not part of the deal. This agreement is bad enough and turns heated, such that by the time Albatross flies over the inland Caspian Sea, Robur decides to punish Fry Colin, teach him his place, and threaten him with danger or abandonment. This is where the sequence with Fry Colin dangling in a barrel in open space should have more dramatic weight to it. Robur will recognize no equal at this point. And in trying to become an equal, Fry Colin has trespassed on Robur's pride. As previously written, Fry Colin is not truly endangered, nor is he dropped off in perilous circumstances, but his attitude turns. Robur turning on Fry Colin would be a betrayal of a presumed trust. No matter what Freikolin can learn from a supposed genius like Robur, he now knows he can't count on such egotistical, unscrupulous men, Robur, Uncle Prudent, and Phil Evans, to value his well-being, much less recognize an equal mind and heart in any great endeavor. So, for the rest of the voyage, as written, while Prudent and Evans await their escape, so too does Freikolin independently. The details are much less important than the fact that he has no reason to engage anyone on his behalf anymore. When the first real opportunity to escape presents itself, he doesn't even care to bring along Uncle Prudent and Phil Evans. Freikolin just takes off independently. That the two manage to escape as well is of no consequence, and the story proceeds apace as previously written until the end. To make a proper end to this modernization/rewrite, the themes must remain intact, that scientific knowledge and social mores must advance before pride and privilege. After all, no amount of puffery nor rank or privilege ever made a successful flight. Only dedicated and ceaseless work ever did that. So the stage is set as previously written. Uncle Prudent and Phil Evans think themselves free of Robur. They go up in their dirigible, the Go-Ahead. Everything seems to be going well. Then Robur shows up, and the Balloonians panic. They try to escape, but for all their thoughtless partisan defense of lighter-than-air flight, they have not conquered the air as Robur has. Their final bid to escape their presumed danger, they end up destroying their own airship, and have to be forcibly rescued by Robur in his albatross. So far, all is as previously written. Except Robur himself and Albatross also get into trouble. For whatever reason, some malfunction was overlooked when Robur returned to Island X and rebuilt his flying apparatus. After all, it doesn't take much to nullify an aircraft's airworthiness, and Robur's want for revenge on account of his first aircraft's destruction and their mortal peril is good enough reason to be distracted and miss something. This is where Freikolin comes back into the picture. Either he was part of the Go-Ahead's flight with the other Balloonians, or, as I'd like to imagine, he shows up in his own flying apparatus. Maybe a kind of autogyro kite, or Wright Flyer style, or Lilienthal style glider. However way he does, Freikolin jumps in to save Robur and company. And if Robur is really to earn his character arc, such as it's written, then the parting words he offers to the audience, both in story and the readers, will have a greater meaning. That those talented and dedicated are worthy of respect no matter their origins. Then he will say his gift will become available when he says so, but that's neither here nor there for this rewrite. So the story ends. Robur flies off into the metaphorical sunset. The Balloonians exit stage right, deflated, with no more popular credibility, and Freikolin finds his own motivation to continue his endeavor in the pioneering age of aviation.